What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Lioneye's Watch Podcast. Tonight we once again have the pleasure of having ZiggyD on for a discussion about hardcore versus softcore, the current skill tree, and the upcoming 3.0 beta. And in good Australian fashion, Ziggy, how you going, mate?
Hey, mate, how you going? Something like that. Sorry to shout at people's eardrums is the first thing I say on the podcast. Welcome, and thanks for having me back on.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you look great.
How about you, PT, Henji? You doing good?
I'm conscious still.
Yeah,
Still
I'm great.
I mean, that's...
Still working out those challenges.
How many have you gotten?
38, 37, something like that. I need the end game grinds and then the Guardians, but that'll come soon enough.
I think I'm at like 3. Something.
3? How?
3 challenges.
I don't
think that's possible. Not like playing at all.
I've never really cared about the challenges, honestly.
Yeah, but I have 28 and I haven't tried a single one. Like I've just
Yeah,
accidentally.
I may have more than 3 then.
Yeah, there's like no way you'd accidentally get so many of them.
Yeah, okay. Ziggy, you had an unfortunate rip, didn't you? Yeah, the other day.
Oh man, last night, yeah.
Tell us what happened.
So I have this thing where to end the stream, I always want to end on a bit of a high note, right? I don't want to ever end with people feeling bored.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I usually run a super rippy map or a crazy map or a fun map, like a triple pack size C, which is beyond the crazy mods or something like that. So something entertaining to finish the stream on. And so I'd just been building a low-life essence drainer, and I'd put about 700 to 800 chaos in it because I had my shavs and obviously had to invest a shit ton in gear, and ES gear is super expensive. Like the ES jewel is like 40C at the moment, you know, the EOS conversion jewel.
Yeah.
And I had a 6-link +1 decay bow as well, that's another several hundred chaos. So so I'm like, but what I hadn't done is, because I equipped most of like the bow and the shavs and everything before 69, which was a bad idea in the first place. I couldn't buy things like hubris circlets, so I didn't actually have any good ES gear on yet. I had like heaps of expensive gear, but not like the core stuff, like actual ES gear. So I was running around with 7k ES instead of like 9k or something. Mm-hmm. And I jumped into a tier 7 map. I was crushing it, destroying everything because I had ridiculous damage, obviously. And I out this crit, double increased damage, added fire map, and just walking along, just still one-shotting everything, whatever, it's all cruisy. And then Vol just charges me. I get in range of Vol's sight radius. First thing he does is charges me, instant crit, one-shot.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, you
just 700C straight to standard. Little corpse left there ignited.
It was a vulnerability map as well, right?
I think it might have been vulnerability too. Yeah. It was a ridiculous map. I didn't realize exactly how much at the time, because here's the problem with my idea of always doing the crazy map at the end of the day, right? It's when I'm most tired after like 5 or 6 hours of streaming. Mm-hmm. I'm like, at that point, I'm kind of exhausted, right? And I'm like, my focus isn't on point. Like you can see in the video, I didn't react at all to them charging at me.
You look shocked.
So that's not the best time to be running like a ridiculous map like this. So that map was crazy, and then I got obviously unfortunate with the crit, but I was obviously asking for it. And then and not having proper gear on to protect my like several 700C investments that I had. You know, not having proper ES gear. Like I was wearing a 190 ES helmet with a shavs.
How did you save up for that?
Not good. Well, that was just kind of most of the profits of my work over the league, to be honest.
Great.
All in one go. I mean, I saw coming up to the end of the league, so I was like, I might as well invest all this money. I made it all doing Viper Strike, actually. Viper Strike was so successful. Made it to like 92 or whatever, and did so much content that it produced hundreds and hundreds of chaos of money. Nice. And I found the shavs myself and a Kelm's Heart in the same map. And I actually ended up selling the Kelm's Heart to buy a bow. And I was like, okay, this character needs to make the money back so I can buy a Kelm's Heart again when the Fire Laser skill comes out. But no, I don't have any characters.
What's new?
And My only other character in the league needed that Calm's heart because it was its chest armor.
Yeah, it's just typical. What are you doing now,
I'm
then?
dead. I'm dead. Well, so I'm going to PAX this week, so I'll be away for like a week. But when I get back, I'm going to make a budget build. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a budget build guide for one of the new skills.
Yeah.
I
Great,
like how
great
you play, your challenge Viper Strike for yourself, and you're like, oh, this is a harder build to play because, you've got a name lock, all that fun stuff. Then you're like, I'll just do like a super meta low life essence drain with the, the decay. Oh, it's, for fun, show off what you can do. One shot. Well,
That's
Yeah,
what happens.
that's
Ziggy's
it.
trend is like he'll take relatively cheap items, and then over time they will become more and more expensive. But this time, he went in knowing it's going to be stupid expensive. Like he went into an already expensive market. And how does it feel? Like, what do you do to console yourself after such an expensive death? You just go talk to Amy and be like, Amy, make it better.
I don't even know if I'm like in shock or what. I think I'm just like, yep, that was probably gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a pure acceptance. Like I don't know. I don't actually feel like it hurt more when the Viper Striker ripped than when this character ripped. Even though the Viper Striker, obviously not using like super meta gear or anything, not really that expensive.
But let's talk
I
about
don't know.
some
Like
of
this
the,
didn't hurt that much. It's weird. It's weird. Like I would have thought. I thought this would have hurt more, but I'm just like, oh well.
You didn't look too
shit happens.
discouraged either.
Yeah, no, it didn't like it didn't bother me at the time. Usually my first reaction when I die is like I'm usually like cracking up laughing because it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And then usually the pain settles in later. And so I've been waiting for the pain to hit me and it's been like 12 hours now and I'm still okay. So maybe it's just going to be a super delayed reaction and tonight I'm just going to be lying on the ground in the fetal position, but I don't know. Hard to explain. Yeah, I don't know. Like I thought such an expensive rip would have hurt more, but I think the money in the character is less important than your kind of like personal emotional investment in the character.
Mm-hmm. And how enjoyable it feels to play that specific build and how much
Yeah,
fun
I guess
you
because
have
this
with
was
the
only
grind.
70. Like the character was only like 72, so I didn't really have enough time to really get too attached to it. Even though all the money.
Yeah.
I
It's
would
like,
really.
don't
Don't
all
get
that
me wrong. I'd really like to have that money back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
Then you see currency
I'm okay.
doesn't buy affection towards the character, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
that's money can't buy your love.
We're going to start with the build of the week here, guys. Then after that, we're going to head into hardcore versus softcore discussion. The build of the week we're having this week is designed by GreenGroove, and it is an explosive arrow elementalist. Hedgie, will you take it here?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a very good guide because I'm like a huge fan of when people put low gear requirements to really high level and high gear requirements, and he's got that spectrum listed throughout his entire guide. So if you're looking to start something, this is a great place to check out an Elementalist, EA Elementalist. I'm also playing one too, but it's interesting to see his take on it. He said he's played EA in the past. He tried the champion, and Elementalist is arguably the second best class, so he wanted to explore that. But some of the uniques that he uses, the Gamu's Tiki, I don't know, Gamahu Tiki, I don't know how you pronounce that, but that's a faded unique. Yeah, it gives you up to 70 fire damage. It's a very easy unique to get, and you can corrupt the crap out of him. Maybe you'll get +1 max res. That'll help you with reflect, get a frenzy charge, get +1 curse. Doriani's invitation for the leech and the chance to ignite. Devotos is an obvious EA choice because it gives you that movement speed, attack speed, dex, chaos res. It's all around good shit. And then he goes and uses 10 grand spectrum jewels, 10 or 11.
11.
I think he said he tried 12. But then he started to kill himself to reflect.
Yeah.
So at 10, you're looking at
605.
605, yeah. Increased elemental damage. That's insane. That's way more damage than my Elementalist. That's also very, very expensive. And at 12, you go, 720%?
Yeah, it's something exponentially much higher. I think it's 700 and something,
Yeah. And he makes use of the 2 new bases, the opal rings, which is something that's available to the EA characters now. You get, I think, 25% or 25% elemental damage, and that's global, so that'll work with your ignites. And then he picks up overload, so he does push crit and accuracy on some of his items, and he gets crit chance with fire skills on his jewels. And I mean, I can't imagine how much shit he's blowing up. He also mentions all the swaps that he does on certain fights, which is very nice. He swaps chance to ignite with elemental focus for bosses that are immune to ignite. He says general bosses you would like to avoid: Etziri, Argus, Phoenix Guardian, any enraged boss, the Vol trio, and the twin Uber Vols. But
yeah, and he uses the Dying Sun as well. Did you mention that?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I think
the Dying Sun can be used in any build, and it's going to greatly enhance.
But in this build, it's absolutely insane. It just, crazy.
This is like the best case scenario for Dying Sun, pretty much. It's insane.
I mean, I'm playing an EA character right now, and I wish that I had the Dying Sun, but it's 500 chaos for that one flask, and I'm just like, I can't get myself to do that.
Gotta work towards it a little bit more every day.
One of the interesting things that I saw that he did was incorporate Vol Lightning Trap when he's already an Elementalist. And I'm guessing he does that just because he's sick of the timer and he wants more consistency. But I was like, that's an interesting choice. I think I would have chose, like, I don't know, maybe a defensive one, but there aren't many defensive ones that are going to help you against Reflect. And I like how he's kind of like played with the number of elemental or grand spectrum jewels to see how much it's going to take to actually one-shot yourself and how much HP is actually going to be required to not die.
Yeah.
So.
And that's one of the things you're going to always have to watch for if you haven't played an explosive arrow build is Reflect is not your friend. Yes. It's going to destroy you.
You'll have to take precautions, and he does that.
One of the... Oh, sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things you have to remember when you're doing some kind of explosive arrow build, since Quill Rain can last you for so long and you really don't need a +3 bow, you can actually get 2 5-link or 2 6-link Quill Rains, and that way you don't even have to swap your colors and optimize that. So you can use a weapon swap and get a lot of value for your Quill Rains. Your general link setup that you can have for your general clear, person's using explosive arrow, greater multiple projectiles, some fire pen, less duration, chance to ignite support, and then the elemental proliferation support. The one thing you can keep in mind with how they've set things up is you don't even need Empower. A lot of people think you're going to need an Empower before you can actually get that type of damage that you need for explosive arrow. Since they made less duration and more multiplier, that hasn't been the case. Yeah. For single target, it's just the chance to ignite, conk effect, Empower, slower projectiles, explosive arrow, and then fire pin. So that's what he's using to swap. And then, as Hedgie mentioned, for certain scenarios, you have the flexibility. The key one being the chance to ignite into the elemental focus.
And then he uses So go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, the nice thing about this setup is that he doesn't really even need to swap anything for most single target scenarios because this is not an impact-focused elemental explosive arrow build. So impact is where you are trying to overlap as many explosions as possible, usually using GMP and lots of extra arrows and stuff like that. He's just using LMP just for clear speed here, and this is an ignite-focused build, hence the chance to ignite gem. So it's more about bigger single explosions that are then proliferating through Elementalist. So at most, all he needs to do for like a tougher boss fight is take his LMP out and just go down to a 5-link. He doesn't even need to necessarily do a bow swap. Now, he could eventually get like a +3 bow and have like a slightly different setup in there for single target, but not really even that necessary. So I quite like that, actually. It's been a while since I've seen a more ignite-focused one as well. Even Elementalist ones that I had seen had been still playing impact-style explosive arrow, but this is really nicely executed.
I played a Chieftain Ignite EA character not so long ago, and like the ignite damage is so powerful. You can do top content with no issues. But one thing he also does is that he uses that frenzy setup, curse on hit, so he does generate some frenzy charges together to boost the damage, and he actually also uses the essence worm ring and then a purity of fire set up to help with some of the reflected damage. And that's how he goes about that. He has, as Hedgie mentioned, he has 2 versions of the build. Actually, there's a few more, but there's 2 regular versions, or 2 important versions. There's the regular one. You can do that for very cheap. It doesn't require any expensive gear. And that by itself, that build has 241% increased maximum life. And, well, that's quite a lot of life. If you then manage to get yourself a Combs Heart, you scale that pretty effectively, right? But the sick version is the one with all the threshold jewels, and that, as Hedgie said, he uses around 11 of those for 605% more increased elemental damage. And the interesting part about doing that is that by going to all these jewel nodes, you scale all the damage through that basically, so you don't pick up any other damage nodes in the skill tree. It allows you to focus on life for all the remainder of it. And yeah, that's about it. It's a pretty solid build, very well written. Go check it out, guys. If you type !point build of the week, you can find it there, and it's worth checking out. You don't need to have that very expensive gear and the threshold jewels.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, one of the interesting things you need to keep in mind with explosive arrows, it is one of the builds that actually has a shot at Grandmaster, or all the Grandmasters.
Okay. Never tried that.
A lot of hardcore people never will.
Good idea.
All right, guys. Now for a discussion that I've actually been looking forward to having ever since I changed from hardcore to softcore myself. We're going to talk a bit about, hardcore versus softcore. And we have a straw poll for this we would like you guys to participate in. And the straw poll is basically, should instant escapes exist in the game? So this includes portals, logging out, including the logout macro, things like that. And PT, will you link it?
Yep,
and then I will see if I can show it here on stream. There we go. And I may have to refresh it, and then it pumps up again. But go ahead and vote, guys, and we'll see if it works. So first of all, why do you guys choose to play either hardcore or softcore? Ziggy?
So my choice is to play both. I adamantly am a player of both, to the point where I've split my time almost exactly down the middle, 50%. And the reason is that, well, both have a lot to offer in different areas, and you get pretty unique gameplay experiences either way. So when I play hardcore, I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. Some of the most fun I've had overall in the game was this league, and then last league before that, when I was playing softcore, I was also at the same time getting a lot of different experiences out of that. You know, getting to play content that I wouldn't normally do and play builds that I normally wouldn't do as well. So each offers too much. So I think I feel well equipped to discuss this topic because I have a pretty good grounding on I think what each league offers, because I enjoy both of them so much.
What about you, Hedgie, and then PT? What makes you guys make?
Well, I play hardcore because it's the most fun I can have in a PvE setting. However, I am thinking about making the switch, not this next league, but in the coming expansion. And it's because there's this ongoing problem. You know, I'm a Timmy type player. I like making weird builds, and I like getting fun interactions, and it requires a wide variety of items and accessibility to items. And if you play throughout the entire league, it starts to slow down about halfway, and it just becomes, worse and worse and worse because of the, player drop off, and the accessibility to items just tank, and then the prices go up because of supply and demand. And it's really starting to annoy me. And that's what makes deaths this late in the league so painful, is because I have to wake up and I'm like, all right, it's time to start a new character, but holy fuck, I'm gonna have to trade for so many items, get so many gems, and it's just a pain in the ass. And it's so annoying to get all these AFK replies, and everybody's got their breaking limit. And since I'm all about getting all 40 challenges and doing it myself, it takes a long time and a lot of effort. But Probably in the next expansion, I might make the change to softcore just because I'm so sick of the trading problems late in the league. But in the very beginning, it's not a problem at all. I'm having the most fun, in hardcore. But I can play both and enjoy both. I just do different things.
Mm-hmm. What about you, BT?
I was just gonna say, in ARPGs in general, have always played hardcore, and even if there's an ARPG that doesn't offer a hardcore version, I'll probably ignore it. The reason is I like losing things in a video game, and in the softcore setting, I guess to me that there isn't. I can't remember who decided. Like, there isn't the failure state. There isn't a lose. Where in hardcore there is a lose, and that's a fundamental thing that I look for in a video game. So
an
it's not
XP
offered to
loss
me.
is not enough as a loss.
No.
Not enough as a loss. Okay.
I'll fucking chain corpse myself all day every day.
I think I kind of myself when I decided to back in the day decided to try hardcore. I think what I really found intriguing about hardcore was the feeling of constantly having to gear check your character to make sure your character is ready to take on the content, and that made it feel more engaging for me with that specific character. I got to learn so much more about the game because, well, if you didn't read up, well, then you might die, right? And also kind of like what PT says, it's not necessarily that I like losing my character, but I like the incentive to start a new character when I lose the character. And I think maybe sometimes that has also something to do with, maybe we can all three attest to this, when we play the game this much, sometimes we can exhaust the game content. And by having to start over a few times, well, we basically add longevity to the game in some aspects at least. And I think that was what I enjoyed very much for hardcore back then. I will say though that right now when I'm playing softcore, I don't think I've ever had as much fun in Path of Exile as I am now again. It is so much fun to just go up against all the bosses, and well, there's still the chance of me when it's, if let's say we're talking Guardians, Maddhatterui, or Shaper, you still have a cost of currency loss if you don't complete these maps, and it's actually quite significant. A Guardian map goes for 30 plus KS in many situations. The Shaper costs quite a lot to get into. The Maddhatterui costs a lot to get into, and it's kind of disheartening when you don't get them down. So there is still, you still feel like you are losing something, at least for those types of fights.
Yeah, financial loss.
Yeah, a financial loss. And that's why I haven't done Shaper more this league as well, because I simply, if I don't feel like I can kill him, then it's simply not worth the currency for me. But it's of course not at the same level as losing one's character and having to start over.
Well, one of the moments that you end up avoiding that I remembered related to you lifting nerd, bro, you were trying to do the crit Mjolnir.
Yeah.
In 2.3.
Yeah.
And you like just got into maps, you're getting your character, organizing everything, like, okay, you know, you have your idea, you got your plan, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
You just like was leap or whirling to the boss, I can't remember, and just you instantly die, and you're like,
yeah. I get fucking charged by 7 Chaos Rowers. Instant I never saw that. That fucking sucked. That fucking sucked.
And
But-
yeah, when you die in hardcore, it's usually the range between like 50 and 70, or maybe like 50 and 60.
Yeah.
Or there's that window where you're just kind of like,
Yeah. That didn't go as I'd hoped. Here we go again. But I also feel like there's also some merit to the whole idea about some of the vault skills in softcore, because some of them are too rippy to play. For instance, in hardcore, Vol Cyclone, you would never play that, or Vol Righteous Fire. You don't play that in hardcore, well, with exceptions, right?
well, there was the person who ripped. He clearly played it.
But he ripped.
That misclick.
That's
So lifting. So you said you liked when you played hardcore because I guess the game forced the decision on you to re-roll and make a new build.
Mm-hmm.
But you've made like how many builds on softcore?
I've probably tried 5 or 6 now, but
So-
I'm playing these characters for a significant longer duration than I do in hardcore, and I also feel for me it's much more satisfying to invest currency into a character on softcore, and just in hardcore I just want to make sure I can just barely complete the content, or at least some of like top level maps, right? But in softcore, I want to push it. I want to see how high I can get the DPS. I want to see how high I can get my energy shield on my life, because I don't have that fear of losing it. And, well, then that currency, I don't have that to invest into the new character, right? Like Ziggy's situation right now. So, but I think the game, one of the reasons I think maybe I enjoy softcore more now than hardcore is also the game has kind of changed. For back then when I enjoyed hardcore, the game was very much, I think 78 maps was the highest content you could do at the point I started up. And, you know, there were some tough map bosses, right? But you could still, if you had a good hardcore character, you could get to 78 maps and you could reliably do that, right? Today, you have these insane bosses, and I feel it's the game, while there's your characters are stronger, it's also significantly more challenging at the top for those specific boss encounters. I don't know, what do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, the addition of much higher level content these days, so Guardians and Shapers and things like that, I think makes softcore even more rewarding now, because it was pretty easy to cap out at the highest level of content in softcore before, but now even still getting to Shaper and getting through Guardians and stuff is still going to take quite a bit of work even in softcore. So even for like a fairly dedicated character, so that's definitely improved how rewarding softcore is. But whereas before, like you said, you know, I think the idea of hardcore was like improved the longevity a lot when we really needed to. That's a little less needed these days.
Exactly. So maybe we should. This is a fairly. It has the potential to become quite toxic. This discussion here.
No, we're all cool here.
What do you guys think about the instant logout methods that exist in the game right now?
Well, I think a good way to actually start the discussion more so with Lifting and Ziggy is how do you use logout tools differently when you play softcore and when you play hardcore?
All right, Ziggy, go ahead.
So I don't think I've ever logged out in softcore. It just you just enter a different mindset entirely, where I'm quite willing to suffer that, you know, the embarrassment of my mistakes. I feel like that's like a nice you know, if I derp and make a mistake, then, you know, it's slightly embarrassing to die on stream, and I like to reward people with that. But yeah, I don't think I've ever even like instinctively gone for a logout macro while playing softcore, even while it's still installed. But I don't these days have issue with using my logout macro in hardcore, and we can get into that topic in a bit. I originally didn't. For the longest time, I didn't use a logout macro in hardcore too, which is something that I wanted to put myself through before I started using logout macro. So I've gone through a range of thoughts on this overall. My original reasoning for not using logout macro for several years was that I didn't want to get myself into a playstyle where I would be relying on a logout macro. So I wanted to learn to play the game without that safety net, essentially. So that meant approaching the game a little differently, right? This idea that when you have a logout macro, you play like you have a logout macro. So you know, you get yourself into silly situations, and you jump in headfirst and that sort of thing, to stuff that you might not be prepared for. Now, so once I kind of had proved to myself that I could play with that play style, then I started using a logout macro, and then that obviously let me play a little harder in hardcore. So I would say now that I enjoy the game more now that I do use a logout macro in hardcore, which is a really interesting point that a lot of people, when they're arguing against the idea of a logout macro in hardcore, is like, why don't you just play softcore instead? And the ultimate answer is that even with a logout macro removing some deaths, I still really enjoy hardcore. Obviously, you still die all the time. I've died plenty this league with the logout macro, but despite or even with the logout macro, it's still a really enjoyable experience. Hardcore overall. So I don't think hardcore logout macros necessarily destroy the hardcore experience, but I am on the same topic. Very curious to see what the game would be like without instant logouts too.
So your enjoyment of hardcore is mainly with the thrill of your character, not necessarily the economy or the community.
So, well, no, definitely. I like the way the economy changes in hardcore. I prefer like having more liquid low end items, which is what you get in hardcore. So I quite like that as well. But I think that the thrill of hardcore doesn't necessarily come from dying. It comes from nearly dying. And when you log out macro, you still nearly die. Like that, you still get that experience, right? Like you're like, oh my god, I only just survived that. And there's that moment where you're like on the login screen, you're like waiting for it to load, and you're like,
did it actually log out?
Did I get it in time? So you still get that thrill of nearly dying. That near miss, that just surviving, is I think where most of the thrill comes from in hardcore. Like. If you ever like ask me what do I enjoy about hardcore, it's nearly dying, not dying so much. Dying can be an enjoyable experience on reflection because you like learn lessons and stuff, but nearly dying is the exciting part. That's where the adrenaline gets pumping, and logging out, you still get that.
That's true. So am I the only one then? When I played hardcore, I would use a logout macro as well, but every time I used it, I would feel a little dirty. I would feel like this doesn't feel right. I felt like I was cheating the game a bit, if you know what I mean. I don't blame anyone for using the logout macro. As I said, I use it myself, but it feels wrong to me. It feels dirty. What do you think?
I mean,
do you think that's because of like how like there's this kind of like general stigma against it?
No, I honestly.
Chat.
You think it came from yourself?
You're a piece of shit for using it.
Well, there's
like
the
every
chat
time you log
as
out
well.
as a streamer, chat. You know,
Yeah,
there's
that's
always
true.
a couple people in chat that get, guys, let's log out macro.
But no, I feel sometimes if let's say if you find Magmus and you see the flame blast below your character and insta logouts, that to me feels like you are. That's not how the game is supposed to feel.
Yeah, okay. So I get you feel like you're cheating some situations. Yeah, totally. Like, and I get that feeling a little bit too sometimes. Yeah, you're like,
I did something like that today
cheating
actually,
sometimes.
where it was I spawned a Hast in a map, and Hast can be rippy depending on your RNG, the map rolls, and I was just like, I have a logout macro. I leaped onto him, and I'm just like, yeah, earthquake, and I'm like, I don't have a remove freeze flask.
Yeah,
I should probably fix that logout macro just mid time.
Yeah.
So
what and
definitely take those moments.
And how do you feel about that then?
I get a bit mixed with it. I didn't start using a logout macro until 2.2 actually. Because I know Hedgie fucking bitched at me so much because I wouldn't use it.
I actually begged PT.
Because so many times I would do something and I would have like a death related to a game crash, and it was a frequent experience. But in the end, the game crashes still happen frequently, but you can't just kind of use them on the game crashes because you'll get in the habit of using it whenever you're in a situation you're like, what the hell?
Well, let me clarify. I only begged PT because he would come up with this idea and this project. It sounded cool, but he would get to like 40 something and then he would die, and then he wouldn't restart the project. He would go do something else, and that's why I was just like, PT, fix this shit. Log out macro now.
But at the same point in time, I think my problem with the logout macros isn't necessarily what hardcore players do with it, or that it takes away from the hardcore experience. The problem that I find is on the game design aspect of what challenges they can make when players have this access to the defensive tool. related to some people were bitching about it in chat, why we did the straw poll and why we put portals. A lot of people are like, oh, just don't allow the logout macro. Well, then you can Alt F4. It's one button. You can bind it to one button. And then, okay, well, if you're not allowing the instant log and you're even putting a timer in, all it will change is hardcore players will do every encounter beside a portal. That's it.
Yeah.
I do a fight, portal. I move, open a portal. I move, open a portal.
Yeah.
And that's why we put them all together.
And
Yeah, the game design topic is instant escapes in general, so not just a logout macro, though a lot of people tend to focus on the idea of logout macro is somehow more cheating than using an instant portal, like having your portal next to you as you're fighting.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same thing.
Like, the internet problem is an internet problem, but I almost wish that boss encounters were a do or die thing. You know, you enter a zone, you get the penalty or not. Then again, I understand, oh, your internet screwed you over. Well, suck it.
And that is the main reasoning, right, why this whole lockout, instant lockouts, is a thing in Path of Exile, right? It is to prevent those, server... can you explain it, Hedgie? I don't know the tech.
Yeah, I mean, the game is not perfect. It's got a lot of bugs. The servers are not perfect, and there are a lot of imperfections. But it brings me to one of the first podcasts I did with Chris, and I asked him how he felt about the macro, and he's like, well, if the logout macro or the ability to escape didn't exist, they would have to dumb down the game. They would have to nerf so many different things, and ultimately a lot of things would not become a danger because they have to balance based off of, okay, is this actually fair? Like when you go in ill-equipped and you're forced to stay, they have to nerf it so hard. And the reason why I don't want that to go away is because I don't want the game to become like that. I don't want it to be so numb and dull. And I don't want to be ever like, when I approach an encounter, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go in and I could die, but if shit hits the fan, I can leave. But at least I gave it a try, right? If I couldn't log out, then I wouldn't even think about it. I'd just be like, all right, well, I'm going to die. And if there's a 10% chance I'm going to die, then I'm just not going to go in at all. And that's not fun to me. I like going in with the risk and the possibility of escaping. But, like, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I like it when it's very, very sketchy, but I don't want players to play in such a way where they're like constantly throwing up decoy totems every 10 feet just because they can't log out. That would be very, very dull and boring.
Still kind of makes more sense than logging out, right? At least you're using an in-game skill to keep you alive.
What do you mean? Like using a decoy totem to advance? I think that would be very, very boring. I would hate the game if it was like that.
Isn't it more boring to just log out?
No, because I'm putting myself in risky situations. I'm like taking the risk. Otherwise, I wouldn't take it at all.
Okay.
So what Hedges is talking about here is this idea of like focusing on this single part, which is the logging out, and then kind of like judging the game based on that versus judging the entire game and then with the logouts. So like further explain that idea, it's like the way they've designed it, and GG have said this a few times, is that the fact that you can instantly log out allows them to design much more sketchy boss fights. For example. Yes. So the overall, like when someone looks at, like, say, a stream of the game, or when someone plays the game, the overall experience is much more intense and, sketchy fights and stuff like that. And even though you might have that instant logout thing, and even though it might feel a bit like cheating sometimes, overall your experience has been more exciting than like slowly creeping along with decoy totems.
I feel like, though, if we bring up the notorious game Diablo 3, in Diablo 3 you can't log out, right? And I've played hardcore in Diablo 3, and for me that was much, in certain encounters, much more thrilling for the actual fights, because I knew I had to do every single thing I could to stay alive during that fight, and you would just see your life drop faster or lower and lower and lower, but you can't do anything. But you start to think about all these different things you can do to improve those fights, and that to me was more thrilling than in Path of Exile, when I see my life go dangerously low and logouts.
I'm actually glad you brought up that example. I was going to, because I do remember doing Infernal Act 2 Diablo 3 when it first came out, and it was is it Bahriel or Belial? What was the boss of Act?
Yeah, Belial.
Whatever.
And that's Belial, yeah.
Yeah,
Lord of Lords.
And when you went into that fight on hardcore early Inferno, you were like, all right, team, either we're all dead, or we're gonna be in Act 3 and we gotta farm some new stuff.
Yeah.
And so I do like the do or die system, but the do or die system definitely needs to compensate when you realize what you lost in Diablo 3. You lost 5 minutes of power leveling.
Yeah,
Shots.
No, it's not shots. You could get to the max
It's
level
the
in
truth,
5 minutes.
actually.
I did it.
Yeah.
I had a clocked character at 5 minutes time played.
Yeah.
You abused game mechanics, but in Path of Exile, there is much more to the loss in the do or die.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
something I need to keep in mind.
Original Inferno aside, Diablo 3 these days is a lot easier and time to death is a lot higher. And that's both like a result of the fact that you can't instantly log out, and also means that the fact that you can't instantly log out is good in that experience, right? Because you do have these kind of like do I die moments in hardcore, like you mentioned. Yeah. So it's like both the symptom and the cause. Like,
and degens can't really be that scary in a Path of Exile without them being so high degens. They might as well be instant kills for many. So it's a bit weird when they have to balance. Like Shaper's degen, that's a ridiculous degen. But it's a funny one.
Something that I want to ask you guys that's kind of annoyed me is the community reaction to physically clicking the escape, like the log out button after hitting escape, versus actually using a logout macro. And I don't know, people act like it's noble to not use it, but it's okay to hit escape and left click. In my eyes, they're not any different. One is just far superior, both in netcode and getting you out. It's a principle. You're escaping the fight. So what does it matter if it's instant or if you choose to escape and click?
Yeah, I guess.
On that topic, I'd like to see GGG just commit to this whole thing, where they've got this idea that, and they've come out and said, that we support the use of logout macros, and that we think that it's good for the game design, and that we played Diablo 2 and we like the fact you could instantly log out and stuff like that. But then at the same time, they're like a little embarrassed about it, and they kind of is just like, well, we're not really going to talk about it, and we're certainly not going to implement a button that everyone can use to instantly log out. Like, why not just have like an instant portal button then?
Exactly.
I would like to see GGG just own it, just own that shit. Like, this is part of our game design. You can instantly escape.
It would also improve the community, community's ways of looking at this. You wouldn't have these toxic discussions about whether or not it's right or wrong. And there's really, that's subjective.
There's a slight problem with that one, though, and it comes down to why you would be logging out. If we assume everyone's internet connection works all the time, which is the reason kind of why the instant logout is available, and people's computers don't freeze because their game is not coded like a saint. So if the logout button is in-game and your game is the problem, your logout button being in-game is going to be a problem, in which case the Alt F4 is always the better tool. So, though, I can agree that putting in that one button would help, I guess, confirm people not having to look 2 years ago for the one thread where the comment is made and be like, yeah, you see, because it has to get cited over and over and over whenever the discussion comes up. But at the same point in time, the instant logout exists because of temperamental intranet and temperamental coding. That's the problem. So it can't be in game. Yeah,
that's true.
One thing,
and if it's not in game and you're going to allow instant, anybody could always fake it by pulling out the Ethernet cable, or having a tool that essentially shuts down your internet connectivity to that program, which.
One thing I was about to correct you there. I was like, but you're going to be in the game for 8 seconds.
Yeah.
A thing I've always found interesting when, let's say, we defend the the instant logging out, the Alt F4, or the macro, or whether or not you click it or anything like that, is that I think that most of us, I can't speak for you guys, but I think most of us, in the ideal world where there were no internet issues or problems, then I think most of us could probably agree that it shouldn't be a thing in the game, right?
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I do find it limits the game design, and we pushed it to one shot or you live.
So sometimes... Go ahead.
I just think we're so far down the rabbit hole of the game being designed around the fact that you can instantly log out that I don't think we'll ever see it being removed. But I am very curious to see a Path of Exile where logout macro was never a factor in the game design decisions that were made over the course of the years. What that would look like.
What I could see that could help the problem without, fixing the problems of the internet instantly and magically. And the example comes when I did the Uber-Itsuri. When I did Uber-Itsuri and Soul Self-Found, I ended up using 2 portals. 3 portals I ended up using. And I cheated myself out of like the twinning because I just fucked it up. But then on the Uber-Itsuri fight itself, empowered Stormcall, which can be the rippiest part when you temp chains her because it can be instant. I was like, I see empowered temp chain or Stormcall. I just logged out. I didn't do the phase. Then I walked in, waited for the Stormcall to end. If you only had 1 portal, you could not use a logout to avoid a mechanic. You could only use it to avoid a death.
Very true.
Yeah, and then seem to be moving in that direction with things like Shaper and Labyrinth and maybe cutting like having limited portals on certain pieces of content and having kind of those do or die situations where you lose the entire run. Like for example, Labyrinth is like the best solution we're probably going to get in Path of Exile. I think having content where there is greater gravity to logging out. You lose half an hour run or something like that.
Related to the Uber trial, can they get rid of the fucking message when you click your portal? Like, are you sure you want to log out? This message appeared in the game. You know what? If that message appeared on my Xana map when I have 1 portal, because so often I've done a Xana quest and you just forget that it's a 1 portal Xana. You're like, oh, inventory full, leave, for fuck's sakes. But no, Uber Labyrinth. Oh no, I'm in a trial. Shit, log out. Portal. For fuck's sakes.
So with that said, how about we talk about if you guys have some alternatives to this. One thing I thought about myself was that maybe, let's say there wasn't a logout macro. This wasn't something we did, or if we still keep it in there, you could make it so that TP scrolls, for instance, you couldn't use that in combat. So you can't, when you first engage a boss, you can't really, use and leave that area until you've defeated that encounter. And then if you use a TP in a map, alternatively, if you use a TP in a map, that saves the instance. So when you get back in via that TP, or if you've logged out, the monsters will still be in the same position as when you logged out, meaning that you don't get a freebie. You can't just abuse the logging out system and go in being safe again. You would actually
have like a shaver pause, and then you like have to.
Exactly, something like that. What do you guys think about that? I see
2 problems with that. The first is parties, in which case you can't implement it. It would just not be an implementable tool unless every party has to confirm ready and then it counts down.
That might be interesting.
And then the second, I think, is when I think about the behavior of when you run further from, like, for example, bearer mobs. If you run far enough away, the mechanic is like frozen in place, and so there's like this distance in which game time moves from you, and
chirpy.
This is related to the efficiency, or like trying to. I'm making a bit of an assumption here. I assume the reason they would put that limit is for making the processing a little bit easier, and then to implement that, you would essentially need to make it map wide, and that would defeat the purpose of why they've been doing this in the first place. So it might not be reasonable.
It would definitely. It's not as simple as just implementing. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting though, not being able to. You still have to deal with the concept But obviously,
Yeah.
if it's not implementable, then then there's no point in it, right?
I fear for the game if the logout macro was removed, or the ability to escape, not even the macro, just the ability to exit the game, and they retune it so that it's like all cushy and a lot of classes can handle it. It would prevent me from playing so many different kinds of characters against so many different bosses, because like what comes to mind is a trapper. A trapper doesn't have a real way to leech unless he's like not really a trapper. I guess he's more of a hybrid character, and he relies on his flask to restore his mana or whatever. And you're gonna punish a trapper pretty hard, because a trapper is gonna use portals to refill his life flask. He's gonna take hits. He's not gonna avoid everything. There's incidental damage, and I would never want to play a trapper if I couldn't TP or escape.
I actually find that's when I most feel that I'm cheating in Path of Exile, is when I portal for flasks and flasks alone. Like I'm fine, I have full health, and I'm like, you know what, a couple more flasks. Yeah. That's when I feel not log out macro portal anything. That's when I feel I cheated the most.
Suffering through having no mana and no mana flask charges up or something on a boss fight though. Worst time in Path of Exile if that was forced. But yeah, they would need to add more flask generation mechanics in boss fights, and I don't know, maybe even some like flask restore over time system like what Pathfinder has or something.
Yeah.
Well, I like that flask management is a skill though. Like I really like that that's something you can be good at. And I'm not good at it.
But where does the skill come when you can't generate them, you know? Like a trapper.
By using them as efficiently as you can to get the most longevity as possible. And if you fuck that up, you lose your loot.
But that limits on what you can do with boss fights. Let's say Death and Taxes with the Trapper. It's pretty fucking brutal. Like, a Trapper will get by, and he can't even trigger his traps on the enemy weapons. But at least he can go back to town and refill his flask for all the incidental damage he's going to take. Like, there's no way you're going to avoid every single thing of damage as a Trapper.
I think... The thing that I found to be the most realistic thing to implement, maybe to circumvent this issue, if one considers that, is simply just PT touched on it, but simply only have one portal to the boss encounters. Have one try for the boss encounters. If you log out, you're not able to enter that again. It removes the cheese from those fights. But I mean, there is for many of the maps, there is a zone you enter when you go into the boss. Maybe simply make it so that particular zone you only have that one attempt. Otherwise, you'll get locked out.
Yeah, and then you have to like rerun the entire zone if you do, or if it's a map, you have to run a different map to try the boss again. Yeah. That could be like a nice stopgap solution. It's the same idea as like the labyrinth, right? That you lose the run if you log out. That's probably like the best middle of the road solution for PoE, I'd say overall. Yeah. I can't think of any problems with an idea like that. There would have to be more changes to that. Like they would need to consider redesigning boss fights a little bit with the idea that you only get a single shot at them now, so less one-shot mechanics perhaps. More wind-ups for one-shots. There are still too many games. There's too many things in the game that one-shot you without any warning, like Detonate Dead from Offspring, for example.
Your nemesis.
The worst one is that chaos map, the tier 15, where the boss dies and then spawns as something that DTs its own corpse.
Hedgie's rib, yeah. Hedgie knows that one well.
That was... but related to one-shots, then, we can actually kind of segue that to the skill tree discussion we wanted to do, because we want to bring up in general that it's kind of encourages forced pathing. And this is definitely going to come in required life in the bottom right-hand side of the tree, especially if you're a hardcore player, where the energy shield is positioned, the bottom left.
Before we do that, PT, could you just introduce the hideout of the week? I'll show that in the background while we talk about this.
Actually, the hideout of the week is done by the same person that we took the build of the week from. So double points to GreenGroove. He had both, so I was like, screw it, this makes sense. Well done, GreenGroove. You can have your hideout and your build. Now leave me the hell alone. Stop harassing me, you bastard.
This has never been done before.
You're a first. So
Alright.
Ziggy actually really wanted to talk about this. So how do you feel about the bottom right side of the tree specifically?
It's so because I play both leagues, I get to experience what it's like to build certain types of builds in both leagues. And I'll tell you this: it is not fun to try and build life evasion based builds in hardcore. You're very much railroaded into playing the exact same type of tree, and you have such limited flexibility in how you plan that tree because pretty much your entire tree is based around just getting enough life to survive in hardcore. Which I'm going to say is like an evasion build is about 6k life, which is what I was able to only just achieve with maximum possible investment on my melee Viper Striker, right? So that character made it to 92, and in order to do that, I had to dedicate near like 90% of my tree towards getting life. Every single jewel had life on it, getting as much like extra life nodes as possible. So I pretty much had everything from the bottom right-hand side of the tree, even going up and getting the Scion life wheel, and I was only able to just cross 6k life in the high 80s, which is too restrictive. It's not about like there's definitely a point where if you buff it too much, then it becomes too strong, obviously. But the point that I'm more focusing on is not that it's like too weak, but just that it's too restrictive. Basically, all that I was able to do I wasn't able to do anything interesting in my tree. Basically, all of the like interesting stuff that had to happen on that character was through gear. So getting like high evasion gear and getting flasks that would boost my invasion, and using things like Dream Feather and so on and so forth. The tree itself was basically just life nodes and then like some frenzy charges and like one damage cluster. That was it. Like you can't do anything else. And then having, for comparison, can plan some ES builds. It just feels so much more flexible. You feel like you have like 30 extra points to play around with and do interesting things. Like maybe I'm gonna go get Dual Curse. I'm gonna go get some aura investment. I'm gonna go get some AOE nodes and some chance to ignite and stuff like that. Like it's just like horrendous to try and plan life evasion based builds in hardcore right now. Because in order to reach that minimum viability point, you just lose all flexibility in your build. Softcore is fine, honestly. Like you can plan pretty fun builds. It's still a little restrictive because you still want to try and hit that like 170 life fish pool, which means that you need to get every single life node on the bottom right hand side of the tree if you're not getting the Scion life wheel, which again feels mandatory in a lot of cases, which again removes a lot of flexibility because you have to go all the way up and get that, and you've got like 2 ways of doing that basically. Yeah, so yeah, very much. You've probably seen a few bow builds, right? You guys have probably seen like a few bow passive trees. Well, you've seen one, you've seen them all. You've seen the bow passive tree. Yeah, there's basically one of them. So that's kind of the point I'm getting at here.
I actually played a bow evasion character just a week ago. And yeah, it's the exact same skill tree, but I picked up some bleed nodes. Well, one thing I also feel is that because of the lack of life in that side of the skill tree, it's not only the skill tree that feels forced, it also becomes your gear that feels forced. Because when you have that little life, you really need to get as much life as you can on the gear then to compensate for that. And that means there's less, attractive or more fun options to go with if you want that. And then I eventually just ended up scrapping the idea. I just didn't enjoy it. It was boring. I'd done this a million times before, and it didn't even feel strong enough for me to justify playing this type of build as an evasion character.
Well, it's every league before the new content. I do like usually a week and a half and 2 weeks of builds. And then often people are like, oh, bow builds, because people like playing bow builds. I think for the last year, I've just copy-pasted one bow build.
Yeah.
It's like, I have an idea for a bow build. Is it this one? No, you probably did it wrong.
Bow crits.
No, but it's original. It's tornado shot, apparently. Okay.
But this
is your choice. Yeah. You have a Pierce wheel.
Yeah.
Does your build need Pierce?
Yeah.
Pick up the Pierce wheel.
That's true.
Does your bow not need Pierce? Don't pick up the Pierce wheel.
Yeah.
Yay, team!
Yeah.
See, I kind of carry some of the same sentiment. I feel it's okay to have around a 6k HP archer, but like an evasion, dodge, archer. But when it's melee, that's far too punishing because archers, especially crit archers, have other tools like knockback, which is very strong when you get good crit, and you can keep yourself, alive in a lot of situations. But melee, like a Viper Striker, especially a name locking melee, you are going to get wrecked by the volatile. It's just like you're kind of just waiting for that day, when the right monster has volatile and subviz, and you're dead.
You just have to do it. You just have to do it, man. You just have to deal with it, bro. Because I'll tell you what, you just can't get over. You just can't. Like I think I ended up with 6,200 life at level 92 with every single life node, and life on all my jewels, and really good life rolls on my gear. I mean, basically, you just have to go armor and use a calms or something if you want to get more than that, or go armor and go that left side of the tree and get more life that way. So you basically have to not play an evasion build.
Did you never consider going iron reflexes?
No, because I wanted to do this, right? Like this build was a challenge build in the first place. This build was a challenge build in the first place. I'm going to play name lock, Viper Strike, life, evasion in the energy shield meta. ZiggyD throws off all shackles of the meta.
The Edge Lord.
Still use poison.
Oi.
All right.
Well, Poison's okay.
Poison's fine because 2 bosses can't get damaged.
Look, Viper Strike's different, okay? Viper Strike's different.
Okay.
Yeah, it only has 8-second poison, so it gets 300% more of the bullshit damage.
Look, I couldn't go crit, okay, because I was playing an evasion non-crit sword build because I couldn't go. So people say like, oh, you can get like 200k DPS with Viper Strike. Well, I had DPS that was, maybe almost as good as like a ranged character's single target. Probably not though, because I couldn't go crit because I didn't invest so much in life.
I also
hedgy. Oh, sorry.
Like Ziggy, you mentioned that part of the tree, and while I agree that if you go CI, for instance, you have a few more options and all that stuff. But at the same time, I also feel like there is the very standard melee AoE builds. Like, that's pretty much the same skill tree you use, with maybe a few differences over time. There's also pretty much the same caster AoE build if you use Eldritch Battery, Mind Over Matter. Then you have a skill tree that uses CI for that matter. And I guess the thing comes down to that maybe we have had this skill tree a little too long.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe we need to brushing it up right now. What do you guys think needs to be added? What would you guys like to see changed to a new skill tree if that was the case?
I often find one of the issues isn't necessarily that the tree needs to get changed. Sure, from a personal standpoint, it's something new that I get to play around, and that is fun. But if it was balanced in theory, let's just assume it was, why should it be getting changed? Like, should it be changed for the sake of being changed? I find my issue with it is the way that the wheels are placed, especially entry points to many of these wheels. So if you look at the bottom right-hand side of the tree, as ZiggyD was bringing up as an example, Ziggy wasn't necessarily complaining that the maximum he could achieve was like 6k. It's that because of where the life nodes are and all the travel to it, he's forced into this similar pattern. But if you add different entry points to a lot of these life wheels, or maybe open up some of the choke points, for lack of better terms, when you talk about like the outer wheel, the inner wheel, and then the smallest wheel, this could allow you to path to the life wheels differently. Because the problem is you have one way to path to many of these life wheels. And that single way you have to path with it to it, or the second way, and if you're going past it, you've consumed both. That's the problem.
I can understand that argument, but wouldn't we just end up in a similar situation a few months down the line where then we have the exact same and most efficient path for those types of builds? That's kind of what I mean with maybe brushing up, getting a revamp of the skill tree. It's fun, right? It opens up. We have to experiment finding a new, most efficient ways.
Well, I think where it comes like To make an example, it would be the crit sword wheel that's near point blank, bottom right hand side. There's that life wheel, and if you want to get that life wheel, there's this one node that you basically have to take, and you know that. If you were doing a crit sword build and you could path through the north, or if you were doing a bow build and you wanted the King of the Hill, you would path through the the upper side through it. If you were pathing through it because you wanted point blank on some kind of molten strike character for whatever reason, duelist, you could path through the bottom side on the left.
Yeah.
And then it could actually be obtaining that wheel through different paths depending on the build. Whereas right now you just have to cookie cutter stamp it. There's the one entrance point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think what they can do to help dodge, evasion, acro, rangers, and shadow is put the melee nodes in more efficient places with life wheels. Put them in more accessible spots, like along the highway that they want to travel anyways. And that could put them in a very good spot, get them around 7.2k life instead of 6k. I think that would go a long way. And keeping your bow characters around 6k, I think is still very fair, because they can kite, they can engage off screen, they can shoot projectiles that do shitloads of damage. So I could definitely see that happening.
What do you think, Ziggy? Do we need a new skill tree, or do we just need different pathing?
I think I am on board with the idea of just making some further refinements to this tree. Like, certainly they could just shuffle up the tree and make some big changes just to like refresh things a little bit, which would be exciting in its own way, because we get to learn a new skill tree. I really enjoy like when the game changes a lot, because it's like playing Path of Exile for the first time again. It's exciting, but the current Path of Exile tree overall is pretty good. You're always going to end up with best paths to make certain type of things, right? You're always going to end up. There's always going to be most efficient path between point A and point B. And if you want point A and point B in both in two different builds, then they're both going to path the same way, right? But I think overall the current tree is pretty good. And although we may have like a lot of like, if you're making an AoE caster, you're gonna probably make this similar sort of tree, because essentially you're making the same build, you're just changing the skill. I think with a few more improvements, like what I'm saying, like one of the biggest issues. I think there's some issues in the other areas of the tree too, but the biggest one is this like life evasion sort of issue here. I think with a few improvements there, I think we could have a flexible enough tree that just randomly shuffling it up wouldn't give us more diversity in builds. It wouldn't make it more interesting to blend builds. It would just make it new, just for the sake of being new.
I mean, an alternative could simply just be to add more stuff to the tree. Add more interesting keystones, for instance. I don't feel we do it as much anymore in the game, but back in the days, keystones made a significant difference for a build. And they still do, right? But back then you really built around that. And I feel there's so much potential in the current tree to just add some more build enabling keystones. What do you guys think? Do we need more keystones?
They have done that with like elemental overload. Yep. That is
to be fair, it's
that's a boring keystone.
Yeah, it's a boring keystone, right? It's just damage. So
I find it kind of interesting still, but I think you have to be careful with adding too many keystones. But yeah, like you were saying, we're just shifting stuff. Zealot's Oath, Mind Over Matter got moved how many times? Volpack got moved. That changed a lot of things, just moving keystones.
Yeah.
The tree might not be the tree's not perfect. There could be moving one keystone to the other side of the tree. There could be lots of changes like that hidden that could improve the tree. So I would be open for GGG exploring those things if they think there's a good reason for it, that it would improve the game. If they're okay, we're going to move this keystone dramatically over here and change up the tree because we think it's going to have this impact. Then hell yeah, I'm excited to explore that. But just changing it for the sake of changing it to make it new, I think that sort of thing can be done on skill gems themselves mostly, and through uniques and things.
It's definitely not that I just want change for sake of change.
Yeah,
I'm just afraid that if we just add efficient or new pathing, I just think there will be another efficient pathing basically. But maybe that would be fun for a month or two, right? Because then we'll have to work with that. What do you guys think specifically in the skill tree? What does the skill tree do well? Where do you guys find yourself excited branching into the skill tree?
Well, I can answer that one as well as do a little bit of follow-up with what you're talking about, the keystones. Like the keystones that I specifically really like are some like, and I get crucified for this all the time, the new Eldritch Battery. Now, I'm not saying that the new Eldritch Battery is as useful as the old Eldritch Battery and as meta-defining, but it makes you take a look at a character different. It makes the stats work differently, and it actually changes something. Even Valpact, which is very powerful. I don't think anybody here has been like, oh, fucking Valpact, piece of shit. It does remove your regen. It does, like, I am playing Valpact on my Berserker, and I'm like, fuck lab, holy shit. It can get really irritating not having regen in certain situations. So you do have a very different character, and that's when they're very interesting. Then on the counter side, you have Iron Grip.
Yeah.
Even RT, I feel RT needs some more pizzazz to it, something that makes it different rather than, oh, you don't get accuracy. It does have a downside. It's not as bad as Iron Grip in terms of being, but it's just not interesting. And then when you do the same thing to the notables, one of my favorite notables in the tree, there's two of them. I think it's Dirty Techniques, which is the poison bleed one near Iron Reflexes.
Yeah.
And then Claws of the Magpie, which obviously nobody gets because nobody's played a claw build since the game came out, which has the charge stealing. These are notables that do something beyond just giving you stats. And I guess if I had a single gripe of the passive tree, I'm not playing a game where I'm like, okay, this life, or this is the game I'm playing. This life wheel gives more than this life wheel, and when you divide the travel points, so I take that life node. It's not, do I want this with life or this with life? I'm not giving anything up. I'm just, this is more life, done, move on.
True.
For me, it's buffing up some of the wheels that like aren't picked up ever, giving them some unique attribute like they did with bloodletting and other things. But I would also like to see more weapon identity. Mainly I have a problem with swords. I think swords are just, they're further out as far as picking up the nodes, and it's confusing because it gives you shit tons of accuracy and they have horrible local crit chance. And I just it's hard to find some defensive mechanic where you could utilize, two-handed swords and be safe. It's just every time I think of swords, I think of a YOLO build, a two-handed sword specifically. Obviously, I'm not talking about like Cospreys where you use a sword to proc something. I'm talking about an actual sword to do the damage that's local to the sword.
Shaper sword?
Yeah, like that.
Favorite weapon project?
Again, it's like a lot of raw damage, but there's no defensive hype on it other than kill stuff and potentially die to reflect. Like you have axes which give you onslaught, which is great. Gives you mobility. Mobility is defense. You have maces that give you stun and AoE. Stun is useful. You have staves that give you block chance. Swords, you get accuracy when you usually pick up resolute technique anyways with swords. And then the implicit on them is accuracy or crit multiplier. So it's like a sick joke. It's like, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah.
Go, basically a non-RT build that crits for shit. It's like it swords
doesn't
are
make
in
sense.
and I think swords needed to be addressed before they release something like Starforge. I don't think Starforge fixes swords.
No, it doesn't.
And that's a kind of like a poor excuse. I would definitely address Starforge or the sword nodes before I created something like Starforge, because I think they could use some help defensively. Something
if they had an attack pen, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, or like an armor penetration, or like, I don't know, something. Well, I still want something defensive for swords because they have like nothing other than just damage, and here's horrible crit chance with some crit multiplier and accuracy.
Do you want some life on hit for some claw action?
Yeah, maybe life on hit, but claws have already kind of assumed that identity. It's the leechy build. It's the leechy attack weapon, and daggers are the crit one-hander. Every weapon kind of has its own identity. Foils,
I feel like armor evasion is kind of the theme that they should go with, defensively speaking. Something to do with armor and evasion or dodge or something like that.
Actually, yeah. In the terms of where the passives are, it does really fit that perfectly.
Yeah, it's green and red, and the skills that swords use are usually green and red.
Go nicely with a new Vanguard belt if they had some sort of juicy armor evasion mechanics with them.
Yeah, but now you have to make armor evasion good. If you're like, oh, now swords are armor evasion focused, you're like, great, even more useless. I would have rather had the accuracy.
I'll tell you what they need to do that. They need more elemental attacks in the game. It's the moment people become afraid of elemental attacks, the moment armor evasion starts being a thing.
Yeah.
That's what I reckon. Then the Vanguard belts will happen.
Never.
Never. No. No, I'm sorry.
I want to hear your guys' opinion here on some keystones. I was looking at Reddit for this topic here, and there was a few interesting suggestions. And these two here is by Ephemeral Memory, and he suggested a keystone that named Vortex, that's named knockback will instead draw enemies towards you at a certain amount of knockback radius. What do you guys think of that one?
Yeah, I'm all about that. That's something that I've been saying too. Like, melee would be so much nicer if they had some kind of consistent vortex or like a gravitational pull to the character, so you don't have to physically run up to every archer or caster and beat them down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of a funny one, because when you're talking about keystones, it's the unique design versus keystone design, and then I immediately am thinking of the Grip of the Council, I think it is. No, Empire's Grasp.
Yeah.
Empire's,
Empire.
yeah.
And that's the reverse knockback. It gives knockback in the gloves. I almost kind of wish that instead of the keystone, those gloves just gave global knockback and had that effect. But it's very difficult when you talk about keystone design and unique design and trying to overlap them. Because if you add in that, well, now you've made this unique complete shit.
Well, with the Empire's Grasp, you actually have to physically hit them, successfully hit them. And at that point, do you even need the suck in, like, other than maybe the use of Cyclone? Like, if you're using Earthquake,
but that's the thing. The Grasp is just worse than the Keystone.
Yeah.
Another thing that was suggested was a keystone called Freeze Point, and it says cold damage cannot freeze on hit, but creates a small chilled ground. Chilled enemies move 20% slower and attack 20% slower. So it's not as unique by itself. What do you guys think about that?
That sounds like no downside in the current game. Stuff. Everything's freeze immune, so...
I would like hypothermia together with that.
Interaction between chill and temp chains for some pretty dumb reasons of mobs moving like at 0.5% movement speed, being like, I'll get you eventually. That just seems like a problematic mechanic.
I think freeze has its benefits though. I'm not sure I would give up on my freeze, but yeah.
Oh, I don't think freeze is bad, but they nerfed an interaction by mobs getting too slow.
Yeah, true.
And that's would bring it right back to where it was.
One thing I also found, this was another one, Ascendant accuracy rating is dependent on visual radius. So light radius would actually have an impact here. I actually think that one is pretty cool, and right now I feel there is some very limited accuracy notables and ways of scaling it. What do you guys think?
So it'd like replace the regular accuracy mechanic with something that is based on your light radius.
I believe that's the intention of it, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of turning one stat into another. I don't know if that's very thematic. They already have that one thing that turns light radius into rarity, right? There's a unique that does that.
It's the map.
It's
the map. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you
I don't know.
You'd be
It
so
doesn't
fucked
seem
up a
very
slow life
thematic.
build.
I think accuracy is in an awkward point to try to do something like that with it. Accuracy is just this. It's a stat you need. It's not rewarding to scale. It affects melee. It doesn't affect spells. It's so easy to navigate through it with RT. Crit can pretty much get enough accuracy basically just by being a dexterity build with one ring roll.
The hilarious thing is then when you get close to death, you can't hit for shit. It's just yeah, you can't leech anymore.
Panic flailing. That's like super accurate though. If I was close to death, I'd probably be panic flailing.
I remember when someone was trying to design a unique route just because they had one and we were talking about it, and I want a flask that gives you 0 light radius. You're blind. You can't see shit.
But what would it give you though? Like you don't want to be blind.
200% more damage. You're blind, but you're explosive.
4 more projectiles, increased area of effect, and 200% more damage. But you're blind.
Just add it to the dying sun. It would probably stay.
Exactly. Add it to the dying sun.
And it would make sense. The sun is dying. You can't see
exactly.
shit.
Thematically
Everything
perfect.
dies.
I like that. You got blind from staring at the dying sun. It's perfect.
All right.
That should be the
Hey,
downside of the dying sun. It makes you
Yeah.
blind. That would be awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Then I would
Right.
say
So what's
that's
its
pretty
downside
cool.
currently again? Oh wait a minute.
You can divine it so that it rolls 10% increased chances used or charges used. However, you can divine it so it's reduced.
I would love that. It's you are now blind on use. Like, you have to remember how the mobs looked on your screen before. You actually
Yeah, and
fire.
where they were.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
So
would be
good.
so cool. Yeah. Then we have a balanced blast.
All right,
All right.
guys, we have a last topic we want to discuss here tonight, and it is the 3.0 beta. What we want to see.
Hold on.
or what
Before
we
that,
would
can we
like
talk
to-
about the other thing where we
The other thing.
the ascendancy where ascendancies succeed, where the passive tree fails.
Depends on
Oh.
how much time Ziggy has. I feel
Oh,
like.
yeah.
No, I'm fine. We can go as long as you want.
Okay.
All right, 10-hour stream starting now.
No, take it back. We'll go for another 40 minutes. That's fine.
All right. Yeah, sure. Hedgie, lead that on, and then we'll
Yeah.
get into that discussion afterwards.
So I feel the Guardian giving you armor as energy shield, that wasn't really a thing like ever until the Guardian came around. Like your ES and your armor combo nodes on the left side, they had that one wheel that was next to dual totem, and they just totally scrapped it and they incorporated it at the Templar start. So I think armor with ES is very cool thanks to the Guardian.
Yeah, we're talking about what the ascendancies does well right now, guys. Just
Yeah,
in case.
that you can't get from just on the passive tree,
Yeah.
because by itself, those armor ES nodes are pretty damn garbage. You know, you have the Juggernaut giving you physical and or giving you chaos and elemental mitigation, and that was like one of the struggles that Marauders had. They had a lot of armor, they had a lot of life and a lot of regen, but they were very susceptible to chaos damage and elemental damage. So they have improved fortify, damage reduction while at max endurance charges, things like that. That's really cool. And another one is, having an elementalist giving you ailments even if you are non-crit, which I think is very cool. It's, something that the ascendancy offers.
They really nailed Elementalist, huh? Like this idea of this being a control of the elements, the whole Beacon of Ruin and Shaper of Desolation thing is so freaking cool. And they really nailed it with the feel of that.
Yeah, and
Thematically,
then,
it's very well. Yeah.
That's one that I find odd, and I actually dislike the Elementalist being able to do that. Sure, the theme is there, but I always felt that ruins the point of the elements doing their thing. Now, how often do you pick the Elementalist because you're like, well, this makes my fire skill shock? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's definitely fits
I
the theme.
because I'm playing EA.
Yeah. And then they put the reflect damage on it, which, okay, whatever. So it fit the theme to me, but I was concerned that it kind of broke the theme of the elements in the first place when they designed the elementals that way.
Well,
Yeah, you
I
could
like
argue that as a
conflicts
downside.
change. The new conflicts change is so awesome, and the what is it, pendulum? You know how it's like a periodic time where you get an insane buff, and like your elements cycle through. It's kind of like, you're exploding. You're unpredictable at times, and it really feels awesome on a character. I thought I was gonna hate it because I used to play Elementalist Fire Trapper, Elementalist Flame Blast, Elementalist anything. But now, I'm picking and choosing when I'm actually taking shots versus when I'm kiting or I'm just building up frenzy charges, and I like it a lot. But on another note, something that ascendancies bring that kind of like died was the block capping with the gladiator. Like they nerfed block into the ground. You used to be able to block cap on so many different characters, and content was just a joke because block was the superior defense. But the duelist gladiator that definitely brought that back. And you can't really do it as efficiently on another character unless you're using like roomies and flask.
You could do it with a necromancer.
Oh yeah. Bone offer or bone
Bone offering on Mistress of Sacrifice.
Yeah.
I
So
think
that's really cool too. Two classes can do it.
in general, I just find to enjoy the ascendancies that adds new powers or unique abilities to the game. So for me, I enjoy the assassin. While it may sound like assassin is a more damage thing, but it also makes it so that some crit skills you previously wouldn't be able to try crit with, you can now suddenly do that. I think the necromancer is cool because of Mistress of Sacrifice. Offerings now afflict you or affect you. Gladiator is cool because of the blood explosion.
The blood.
Yeah, gratuitous violence, I think it's called.
Bleed.
Yeah. And I think I used to think the Juggernaut was really cool when it had that 100% endurance charge, or top.
Oh yeah,
endurance
whenever
charge.
you gain a charge. Yeah.
And I understand why it had to be nerfed, but it was
Yeah.
cooler because you could reliably build around it in some way. And what I don't find that they do successfully, some of them, is simply that some of them are just damage for damage sake. So you have the Raider, and I feel like the Elementalist to some extent has that as well. What else? Deadeye does that. Pathfinder. There's a lot of them that's just it's just stat bonuses.
Yeah, you are 30% more stronger.
Yeah, exactly. And
That's kind of how I feel about the left side of Assassin, though. I feel like the right side of Assassin, the top right, is really cool because it's got bleed, poison, maim. But then the left side is just, here's crit and more damage,
Yeah, but the crit allows you to take some of those not crit
like the 5% or 4% basis.
I think that's really cool. But I agree that you can also just use it on a crit character to get even more rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ambush and assassinate, I think, are the things that give assassin a bad name. The like 40% crit multi and 100% crit chance. Yeah. Whereas like unstable infusion and deadly infusion, they're cool and interesting. And like you said, they make non-crit. You make skills you wouldn't normally go crit with, able to be crit, which is pretty cool. I think like the key thing, like on the original question, what makes them succeed where the passive tree fails is that there's nothing on the passive tree, not a single thing on the passive tree that has as like bigger impact on the feeling of play of your build as some of the ascendancy nodes. Like for example, with my recent character, I was playing an occultist, and my first 2 points were Wicked Ward, and instantly, energy shield felt like a different mechanic.
Yeah.
So what Wicked Ward works, and I didn't realize this until I actually took it, was that if your energy shield recharge has started, for 4 seconds, it won't end no matter what, even when it caps out. So I thought it was only if mobs keep damaging you, but it's actually when it caps out, it creates this like Slayer Leech style effect where if your energy shield is full and you take some damage, then it instantly starts healing back up. And instantly, energy shield feels like an energy shield. It starts to feel like a powerful, interesting mechanic of your character. Same token, like Slayer Leech, once you actually have enough leech to make that kick in, that completely changes your playstyle. That it like dramatically changes the feeling of your build, like the impact of that. So I would like to. That's what I think ascendancies do well compared to the passive tree. Is like they feel very. It feels very impactful, and the the plate, like it creates new builds, like the bleed explosions and stuff like that, and cultist profane bloom builds and things like that, but also just changes the way you play and engage with certain mechanics like leech and ES.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna say that my preferred one is the Scion.
Oh
Because-
my god.
Because it sucks and I hate ascendancies still.
Oh my
Oh
god.
my god.
Oh.
Going to an earlier discussion, these things would be so much more interesting if they were keystones. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, they would be.
When you
All right,
say
we're ready
keystones,
to move on. Lifting.
no, I'm just curious. When you say keystones, are you saying like one keystone per ascendancy? What, like, how you picture?
Well, I almost feel
Seems-
like if they had an ascendancy keystone where you can pick one on a passive tree, so like
Okay.
an enhanced one, and then so you take those flavor things that you like, that is not damage related, that is flavor and awesome, spread those around the tree, boom. Now think of what you could have done.
Okay. Yeah.
That's, but that's me.
Yeah.
I know I'll get hate for that one, but
Yeah. That's a terrible suggestion.
fuck you. just fuck you. So,
So Ziggy, we have an opening.
where's your vote?
All right, guys. Let's talk about the 3.0 beta coming up. First of all, what are you guys? When you heard that there was going to be a 3.0 beta, what was your initial thoughts, Ziggy?
I guess I was surprised after the community backlash around the last beta.
I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I guess that was my first thought. Was just I was surprised. I was like, oh, they're doing another beta. But then, having been to GGG recently, I guess I'm less surprised when I think about it. They kind of need us to help them with that testing, because they just don't have enough staff to do like the extent of testing that would need to be done for a large content, like an entire new act. It just like it's necessary that they do some form of larger beta test, because they just don't have the staff or access to people to be able to do that. I mean, they're flying people out from all different countries and trying to get them visas and everything like that to get them out there, and they're still not able to get enough people, because like it's pretty hard to convince people to come to another country, even if it's like, come work for your dream company.
Yeah.
It's still difficult to do. So yeah, I guess that's my first thoughts. What about you
What
guys?
worked in the 2.0 beta? So let's start with there.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
the
I'd be happy to kick things off on that. I think what worked was that we ended up with a far more balanced launch than we would have. At that time in particular, Path of Exile balance was a bit of a joke. Like, people still meme about it these days, but at that time in particular, it was notorious that stuff would be released broken and then just like nerfed crazily like within a couple weeks. And
Who remembers the arena trio before Duresso?
yeah,
yeah.
right. So ridiculous. And like even like some stuff still went through, but remember like
Zerfi's youth.
I don't remember Zerfi's, but I remember the totem jewel that gives you extra projectiles, and you could stack as many of them as you
Rain
wanted.
of Splendors.
Rain of Splinters, yeah.
Oh my god, yeah, that thing was
Shooting
sick.
like 50 projectiles.
What I
So
think
stuff
was
like that would have made it into the game, like basically, because GG wouldn't have had the ability to test as much as we did. So we did at a time when balance was becoming a real issue for the game. Get to have a release that was reasonably well balanced.
what I think
So that was a successful part.
more ridiculous, and I disagree with you, Ziggy, here, was the balance after the beta. I found the game was still, especially Act 4, was still so unbalanced, the monster damage values and the boss fights and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And
Yeah, there could
I-
have been more, but
it just seemed like the game was not really ready at that
Don't tell them
time.
it could be more, because they'll make the beta longer.
yeah, no, all right,
That's,
all right.
I
But
just feel they shouldn't
imagine
have
if-
it.
I agree with you, right? So, like Malachi when he first released was ridiculous, right? Like crazy. Like early game Malachi was normal. Malachi was insane, but Imagine what it would have been like without the beta test then, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What if
Like
the
you see,
beta
you
test
complain
made
about
it
that,
worse,
but-
though? Like, think about it from the perspective
I
where
don't
the players who
think
are interested in the beta are more dedicated players. Yeah, there's going to be some newer players coming in, but you look through the Reddit, it's people like, I want to go in the beta, I want to go in the beta, people buying into it. So the
Yeah.
players that are testing the new content are then much more familiar. They're the people they're investing money into the game, that they're that familiar with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the new content then gets balanced around the capacity of these players that just already know the things. And you look at the difficulty curve between Act 3 to Act 4 and then back to Act 1, it's possible because of the experience of these players in general, and that they had so little issues in comparison that what they could have. Because you know what, Malachi, you picked Flame Totem, and you're like, wow, Malachi, cute.
Yeah.
So the beta could have been a balance problem. Sure, some of the things like the Arena Trio we would
They didn't make anything like, because I followed the patches when I was playing the beta, obviously, like most people, and they didn't make anything harder really because of feedback of players though. So I would agree that the stuff didn't get addressed because the people playing were pretty dedicated players, so they didn't voice issues with it. Like we didn't have a bunch of new people going in being like, "Wow, this actor's way too hard. I want to stop playing now." They didn't have that metrics, so I agree with that as like a flaw with their sampling of of
yeah,
players.
I can agree. They didn't make things harder, but it could have just hid that issue, which was very
wasn't. I think it should have been glaringly obvious when a streamer is spending 40 portal scrolls to kill Malachi. Okay, maybe this needs to be looked at. But I felt like things like Ice Crash, Xerfes, Chill of Corruption, these things were all super broken, and community feedback, that's what got them to get nerfs or just scrap the idea and from the start.
But as a community, we don't even agree what the hell should be nerfed in what way. Like I remember there used to be the 2% block jewels, and that was one of the things that I was adamant on that needed to be shifted. And when you talk about just throwing everyone to beta, we're just yelling monkeys, and we all have different things of what's broken. Certain people thought Xerfes' use was balanced, and I'm confused by the people who believe that was a reasonable item.
Yeah, that was not. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun.
I could not say that was balanced at all. I mean, it's like having an early headhunter. It's like I feel like God.
Well, it's better than it was a best in slot item for every single build.
I think what I am mostly concerned about for an upcoming beta, and this hit me in the previous beta as well, is that it took away all the hype for me for the actual release of that new league or the expansion, because you felt you had tried it and the beta was just so long. I burned out faster in that league in any other league I've ever been participating in Path of Exile, and you don't feel like you don't see all the new stuff at that exciting time where everyone is really hyped and all that stuff. It just feels off.
Yeah, it's the early access issue all over again, right? Like your first experience with the game, which should be like your most memorable and epic experience, like the thing that you always think back to, is the most broken and poorly balanced and like missing content experience. Like the first time we played through, there was like placeholder stuff and just stuff wasn't working and things were broken, so you never get that first experience again, right? So when it finally does release, it is totally ruined for sure. That's like the biggest issue with the beta for sure. Like that and like story spoils and things like that. It takes away a lot of the hype.
Sympathize with all those people that are like, they don't want any spoilers, and they're like, what the fuck, I want to watch PoE streams, but everyone's playing the beta and I can't watch any of this shit because I don't want it ruined for me. I mean, it sucks, but at the end of the day, if I had to choose, I'd rather have a game that has fewer bugs, less crashes, and better balance. It'll never be perfect balance, but better than nothing.
I'm probably the opposite there. I would rather have the hype and the feeling of something fresh, everyone starting out, and then accept some bugs to some extent, of course. If it's completely game breaking, then that can change my opinion. But then again, I'm not a competitive racer, and of course sucks extra for those guys if they have to deal with stuff that prevents them from actually playing the game.
One thing that I think that they've learned from every launch is they are very weary to put in something that's so powerful and then like nerf bat it. Like they'd rather be slightly conservative, because imagine you're the player that you're like, oh my god, this is going to be the next biggest thing, and then you invest all your shit into that, or getting that item or getting that power level, and then they're like, oh, you know what, we decided that this is too overpowered and we're going to nerf it to the ground. Like that would make so many people upset, because they're just looking for the latest and greatest, and they're going to flock to whatever shows up on the radar.
Hell yeah, Hedgie. Good point. They actually mentioned that was like that the beta let them try things that they would never try on the live servers, like try items, and like there was a bunch of stuff that was in the beta that was removed later, like was never released, because it was stuff that they were just like ideas that they really wanted to try, but like, and some of them ended up becoming things that made it into the game that wouldn't have otherwise, because they wouldn't have been willing to try that. So that's
at the same point in time, though, you give the opportunity for people to find exploits and not report them, which was one of the things that came out of 2.0. There was a couple of abusable things that were later patched, but I think one of them lasted about like a month and a half before it was finally patched out. So,
what would you guys feel is an acceptable beta duration then?
2 weeks, probably.
2 weeks.
I'll go
like,
2
I think
weeks.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
I think longer
than
than that is pushing it for sure. Yeah, that is too exhausting. Longer than that, 2 weeks is like they need a pretty long beta, and I think 2 weeks is maybe even too short for what they could actually need. Like they could probably do more with 2 weeks, but any more than 2 weeks, and then we're starting to exhaust things too much. Like I think on the whole, the last beta was successful, right? Like the dedicated players, like the really active community, getting kind of like fatigued with the content before it was released was probably outweighed by the extra marketing that the beta push did. Like we had a lot of extra viewership during the beta and lots of people checking out the game and then coming back to later. Like I think probably overall it was more successful, but I think that here's my solution I've thought of during this that you guys I'd like to get your thoughts on for like an alternative, right? So the 2 week beta I think is probably hopefully what they go with, but an alternative would be them to do a closed beta where they pay people that do the closed beta in like unique microtransactions, essentially. So get dedicated members of the community, and like a random selection of like less dedicated community members if possible. And at the end of their beta testing, if they don't break their NDAs, then they get some unique microtransactions or something. Like maybe that would be a better solution.
I think there would be so many leaks.
There would be, yeah. There's always going to be leaks, right?
But I think maybe
like, people are going to see less than like a leak is different too. A leak is sometimes even excitement building than actually like seeing everything streamed and everything.
I think maybe like if they plan on running more than a month, then having like a 3-week alpha, early alpha, and then a 2-week open beta or closed beta. Sorry, they said closed beta, but that could be good. So a total of 5 weeks, and you get some of the earlier stuff worked out. Maybe that way, it's, the majority of the community, they're not exhausted and they're not done with the content. What do you guys think about that?
I just like an NDA on the things.
Yeah,
I'm with lifting. I want to play the product when it's new. I don't want to like pre-burn myself out on it. Obviously, there's some problems with actually like making a beta that does everything they need, because there's so many little things that you can just slip on. Like 2.0, for the longest time, we didn't realize there was an issue with Rejuve Totem because nobody used Rejuve Totem. It was just, who uses Rejuve Totem? So with a game of so many moving parts, you do need essentially to just send a whole bunch of people in to randomly stumble into it. But if there's no NDA, then content creators feel forced to spoil stuff and all that stuff. And yes, betas are good marketing tools, as Ziggy pointed out. But I personally hate that all companies are just using betas as glorified marketing tools and using people to do their work. And it's like, you could stop that. That's a thought.
I was not a fan of that. The exclusive like schedule of streamers that are allowed to broadcast the beta. I was like,
that's something I'm like complete like. So obviously I'm gonna get into a beta, right? If they do a closed beta.
Are you sure? I don't know.
I mean, obviously, like I don't think that's a brag or anything, whatever. But I would, and like if this helps for me to say this, and I'm gonna say this, I would be keen for them to at the exact same time, and this would take a lot of like pressure off me as well, and like other people who get in at the same time, for them to start like if they're going to do selling beta slots, for them to start doing that at the exact same time streamers get in. I don't want to be in ahead of everyone else. I don't want to be in ahead of some other streamer who's trying to build up their stream, or some other YouTuber who's trying to make a break in the PoE market. I want everyone to be able to get in the same time. And like maybe the person who's like trying to build a name for themselves and isn't currently yet a successful streamer has to pay whatever money to get into the beta. But at least they're still able to do that and start producing content at the same time, and everyone's on that level playing field.
I really think that the NDA is the most attractive choice as well. Just make it so that you can't stream or produce video content for it. You can you can release videos or images and all that stuff. But
I think you'll agree with me on this lifting that the best solution for all streamers and YouTubers, and this is just like a complete like within industry thing for us specifically, would be, well, maybe less for streamers but more for YouTubers, would be if they had an NDA and then we were able to record content doing it and then release it on launch day.
Oh, it'd be so nice.
That is the dream.
Take off the pressure of us. Oh yeah, it'd be so nice. And it would work.
We just have all
better.
this time to produce content and get it ready for launch day, and then we all have like this exact same schedule where we can launch at the same time. God, I love when game publishers do that.
Yeah,
it's not done often enough.
It is admittedly also a bit hard to do. Controlling some of the NDA stuff, you don't know who leaks. That's kind of the problem. Right. Like, let's say Lifting's Nerd Bro's a scummy person, and he decides to leak everything. But he's not going to put his name on the leak. He's going to tell somebody, and they're going to post it.
Yeah.
So it's
hard to police.
Yeah.
Really police. It's not realistic. I mean, there are just people that are just going to join the beta for the sake of finding exploits or getting an edge, and then just not reporting it because they want the edge.
I think it's fairly realistic to prevent streaming. Like that's fairly easy for report a stream that's streaming the beta. That works pretty well for people who already have access to games already. I don't know for the YouTube side.
The spoilers on an NDA would be limited. Like, yes, there's always going to be leaks, but it's far less than what's happening if people just like openly streaming it, right?
Yeah.
I think probably maybe a better issue even that chat brings up is the idea that an NDA or closed off situation creates a class of PoE players that are the beaters. They're the guys who have the advantage and all the knowledge, the foreknowledge, not just of exploits, but of just like of builds and mechanics and boss fights and everything like that. And Path of Exile is a pretty competitive game for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, there's already that issue with the alpha realm.
I was gonna say,
like
spoiler, guys. There's alpha players.
Yeah, I know, but there's like 10 people on alpha, so.
I know one of them that races.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, there are definitely some competitive people on alpha. I'll give you that. Yeah, it's true. It's not exactly fair.
No, and I'm definitely for that. I agree with that statement and moving it towards. I almost feel like they could do like a scrambled number at the last moment, so you're missing because there's certain things that you shouldn't need to be testing, and it's one of those. Give them the things that need to be tested. Don't give them the rest. That's a pretty standard practice in a lot of beta stuff. They're like, yeah, we're not giving you access to the game. No. This needs work. We need to know that this is working. You get to play with this little playground, and you're missing a lot.
On that topic, like, do we really need to beta test storyline elements? Could they just take out like the speeches,
all the lore,
and all the lore and everything? Yeah, like.
Before I would have said yes, but then Navali happened, and fuck no.
We need to beta test that they're not annoying. No, why did no one beta test Zana? That Zana voice clipping, by the way, so good. Just cut off the exiles.
I didn't notice that. Did they do that?
You didn't notice?
No.
Go listen to it. They just literally cut exile off in full of sentences.
I like
They
that
just cut it.
solution.
Some of it sounds good, but some of it's just like she's like mid sentence and it just cuts out. Like
I can do
audibly
that
cut out.
in Audacity, man.
The text is still in game 2 when she says it, though she won't audibly say exile. The text will come up saying exile.
I can't believe they did that.
Oh man, I like that. That's a budget solution right there.
Truncate it.
Oh man, I mean, I think one thing that can make sure that there's still some hype. The problem is by making sure that we only test specifically what they consider worth testing, and then remove everything in between, and leave some content that simply just is untested near the end.
I don't
One
even
of
do
those-
that though.
I just remember
Yeah,
one of
that's
the
the
things they
question,
could
if
have
it's
really
possible.
done with the testing. Wild Strike.
Wild Strike is fine, man. Wild Strike is great.
Remember how excited everybody was from its
Yeah.
description?
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
it was like, oh, it'll be like 2 weeks before, so you guys will get to play with it. And everyone was like, yeah, Wild Strike. And there was the last build. It's like, Wild Strike didn't make it. Like, okay, we'll play it while live. And then it was just like, oh, no.
Yeah, it's true. Oh man.
I'm
Well,
so shocked to see that we haven't had the channel skills yet. Oh, man. I don't think we're gonna get it anymore.
2.5.
didn't they?
I think
I'm
in a
gonna
recent,
they'll
lose.
go in the next
didn't in
expansion,
a
yeah.
recent post
Yeah.
say that they would release it around
Well,
November
they
10th?
say
gave the
current
patch number.
speculative amount is November 10th to 17th, maybe.
That doesn't
Yeah.
even make
So-
sense, though, because at November, like, I'm just sorry, marketing, November 10th, they're starting their spoilers, like, it's
Yeah.
always, like, what, 2 weeks before? And if it's coming in December, so that means spoiler, like, mid-December is spoilers or something?
I just when I read that, and let's say it's true that it would release there, I may be the only one who feels this way, but I thought, no, if you're gonna wait until then, just save it then. Save it until
Yeah.
next league so we can have the hype with the new skills and try it out when everyone is excited, instead of, near the end here where it's, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
other
I'd
thing
kind of
is-
rather go play some space games for a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
At the same point in time, if they've been working on the channel skills and they're not done yet, are we not getting new skills for 2.5?
I hope not. I hope not.
You hope
There's
not.
still something on the table.
Well, from a practical standpoint, just saying, that'd be disappointing.
Yeah, I think that we might not be getting any other skills. I don't know, like there was a while ago that I was there now, but I didn't see any other skills in being worked on then. It was just the channeled skills. So unless they've been doing something since then.
On that
Shoulda-
note, do we want to have the prediction now?
I was
P2?
gonna say that
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
good segue.
Yeah. Bring it up.
All right, Ziggy, you can have fun with this one.
All right, okay, so here's what we know about the channeled skills, right? We have a fire laser, don't know the name yet, fire beam, something. We have blade flurry, which is a melee skill, and then we have blight, which is...
Did we know Blade Flurry? I think.
Yeah.
I was
we knew
thinking
that-
the same.
I've never heard of Blade
You
Flurry.
think?
I've
there's
never
that
heard
has
it.
not been confirmed there.
Oh my god.
That was data mined. It's been on the Reddit because it was data mined, but you fucked up.
All right, whatever. Well, I might as well. Look, all right, they did a teaser image of Blade Flurry, and then it was data mined and stuff. That should be enough, right? You're getting Blade Flurry.
Just shut up.
Just let.
Yeah.
Stop. Okay. And then the third skill we're getting is a Chaos channeled skill by the name of Blight, which that name has been spoiled not by me, but by a developer. In one of my dev interviews, Carl said it. So I didn't spoil the name Blight. So, what do you guys predict a Chaos channeled skill called Blight would do?
I've got to go Warcraft to the Death Knights. You had the Death and Decay spell, which was a channel desecrate ground kind of effect. So I'm expecting what desecrate ground would be if it didn't suck.
As like an actual skill.
Yeah, so remove the corpse spot and some kind of channel thing there.
I love your reference to Death and Decay as well, not just as like a Warcraft fan, but as a because it's the icon for Death and Decay is little roses, and Blight itself is an affliction of plants. So I quite like that, and
Cool.
could be right. Could be right. What about you, Hedgie? You got any predictions, bro?
No, I was gonna say something like D&D, but PT already said it.
Well, that wasn't D&D. I guess it might be something.
Death and Decay.
Oh, I was thinking Dungeons and Dragons.
What?
There is a spell called Blight in Dungeons and Dragons.
I was just like, oh, he's got some cool reference to Dungeons and Dragons and some kind of chaos thing coming out. Nope, Death and Decay.
I looked at Dungeons and Dragons for inspiration to see, but the spell in that is, well, I'll be honest with you. Most of the spells in Dungeons and Dragons do like 8d8 damage, and that's about it. Like there's not really anything interesting there, so I didn't get any useful predictions from that. What about you, Lifting?
Like the first thing I just think of is contagion, but we already have that. I don't know if there could be some kind of physical component to the blight skill, but I definitely see it as some kind of degen.
Yeah.
Some kind of physical degen. Maybe you can...
I mean, I feel like it's well, it basically is going like if it's degen, channeled chaos, it's probably a degen, right? Yeah. Like you have to imagine, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that we have an AoE Wither, which is a degen.
Oh, do we know?
Or not a degen, but Wither's a channel. It's an area of effect. It puts on stacks. So we're gonna.
Wither's not actually a channel though. It's just a really fast cast.
No, it was adjusted to a channel.
It's a channel.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So did the channeling changes turn into one? Gotcha.
Yeah. It could.
All right.
Do we know if it's an active skill gem? Could it simply be a support gem?
No, these are active skill gems. These are 3 active skill gems for sure.
Okay.
So I will confirm before I make predictions, because God, it's useful. It's useless me even making a prediction because you guys will just say he just saw it when he was at GGG. All right, I will confirm that I didn't see Blight. Okay, I did see Blade Flurry. I did test Blade Flurry, and I've talked about that a bit on stream already. But I didn't see Blight because at the time, the only thing I heard about Blight when I was there was like, it was like Chris and one of the other devs kind of got together and they were like, Blight's not going to happen, is it? They're like, no, Blight. It's setting the servers on fire currently. Currently it was like exploding the game or something. They just had this little kind of so I was in there doing some stuff and they're like, Blight, no. No. They kind of nodded at each other and then went in different ways.
Very gravely.
It was a really funny encounter. It was just really brief, just as agreed upon, just like Blight.
You're never going to get invited to
just disagreement. It's quite funny. It's quite funny. So with that in mind, I have not seen Blight. I don't know anything about it. My predictions are, I like this plant themed idea. And Death and Decay's project, honestly, his Death and Decay prediction would have been my first prediction. But my other one is that it's going to be like a plant themed channel degen, obviously, and then I think it's probably gonna have some sort of secondary effect. And thinking along the lines of it being plant themed, if we go with that theme, then what sort of things could you have plant that would be like Blight? So I'm thinking roots or tendrils or vines, something that slows enemies maybe. That's what I reckon.
Are you thinking as a main skill?
If it's channeled and it slows, how are you gonna do damage?
Well, as well.
Oh, okay. In addition,
as in it's got a secondary mechanic, right?
Okay.
It deals its damage and it has a secondary mechanic.
I guess you're going to use it on
slows
Guardian, just CC mobs or something.
You could throw up totems beforehand, man.
It's literally just a channeled slow.
Which is funny because Wither has a slow in it.
Yeah, Wither does already have a slow.
Oh, I didn't know it had a slow.
It's one of the I can't remember, what did they categorize those slows as?
It's a maim?
It's the caster version of maim. They gave it a name.
I don't remember.
I just think there has to be some sort of secondary utility mechanic to this, or some sort of debuff. Otherwise, you just kind of treading too much of the same ground with so many things.
Hinder.
Yeah, hinder. Yeah, it could have built-in hinder or something.
Yeah,
good point.
There was the essence mob that spawns those like chaos. It does like a not really a flame, but this cone, and then leaves an area of effect that's similar to the Pale Council Chaos Fight ground effect. But that seems to just be cast in a degen on the ground.
I think it'd be really cool. Like I was kind of hoping to see like a drain life or a soul siphon type thing where, like if you're in a really sketchy part of the fight, you drop a decoy and just start draining the boss. I mean, it might not be good damage, but it's a way to like control the fight or reset it. I think that would be kind of cool. But rip that idea.
Oh well, guys, I think we are nearing the end here. Do you have anything you want to add to it today, guys?
No,
please.
Good convo.
As I'm just gonna say, as always, if you want to submit to the build of the week or the hideout of the week, just try to get a hold of me through like Twitch, Reddit, however you can just bitch at me and harass me. Get a hold of me, and it gets put on the list, and then magic happens.
Yes. And of course, thank you very much, Ziggy, for joining us tonight.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me on. It's just, I was looking forward to this so much. It's always good to, even at 6 a.m. in the morning, to get up and have an in-depth discussion about something I'm passionate about, right? Like, I feel like you don't get to do this enough in real life. And,
yeah, very true. Very true. We're hoping...
you guys aren't real life.
We're hoping we'll get you back again.
Yeah,
in the near
for
future.
Sure.
All right.
I love chatting some Pee-wee action. Thanks for having me on. I would like to, since I have lots of people watching now and I probably won't have another chance, just to let people know that I probably won't be around too much for the next week or so because I'm going to PAX Australia. Though if you're going to be in Australia, well, if you're going to be going to PAX Australia, I guess, hit me up. Chat to me on Twitter or come say hi. Come to listen Magic the Gathering with me or something. It's going to be awesome. So
nice.
I won't see you guys for too much PoE though, for probably about just before the new skills come out, theoretically.
Another spoiler, yeah. You're not getting into the beta, man. You're spoiling way too much.
No, I'm talking about their dates that they put down, 10th to the 17th. Yeah. I'll be back before then.
All right. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in today. If you like the podcast, if you want to see it again, we go live every Sunday evening. Give the stream a follow. If you didn't catch the entire podcast and want to watch it, you can check out the VOD on Hegemony's YouTube, and the video will be uploaded in 5-6 hours, something like that. I need to render it first. Thank you everyone who stopped by. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.
See you later.